Ready when you are, Dennis. Good afternoon. Calling to order the meeting of the Buncombe County Board of Elections for Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Welcome guests. Thank you for attending today's meeting. Mr. Whitney, have we anyone tuned in online? All right. AK, it's great to have you tuned in online. Wish you were here in person. All right. Let's kick off today's meeting with a review of the minutes of our last meeting on August 22nd. Colleagues, did everyone get a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
I know you did. All right. All right. Everyone's had a chance to review and comment. All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 22nd, 2023, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Thank you. The motion carries 5-0. Before I proceed, I will note that all of our meetings are recorded, and they are available online. And I recently was doing some review, and part of me was actually glad that I couldn't hear myself as clearly as I think I should be able to. But the board chair in me said that that's not right. And so I am determined to speak very closely into my microphone so that folks at home can hear and so that our recordings do pick up our dialogue. So just a reminder, if we can be as clear as possible. Thank you. Director Duncan, next up on our agenda is office updates.
Thank you. First update, Bria Bailey is now Sarah certified. She graduated at the conference in Orlando, so claps to her. We added another national certification to our department.
Outstanding.
Tomorrow we begin the first round of interviews for our warehouse coordinator position, so we're really excited about that. We got some good applicants, so we're going to do 2 rounds of interviews for that position, but we're excited to be at this stage. Next update is that we have reviewed and proofed at the county level and state level the ballots for Weaverville, Woodfin, Water and Sewer. And the sample ballots are now available online, so anyone who lives in within those districts can go online and get their sample ballots. The DS950s, the replacements for our 850s, will be delivered tomorrow, so we'll have all new equipment in tomorrow. This week we are working with ES&S to upgrade the DS200s to the new software. And then next week, John Nose from the state, our SST, will be joining us to do the official acceptance testing of all of that new equipment. And then finally, next week, the 19th, next Tuesday, is National Voter Registration Day. I'll be doing some media availability for that, but also, excitingly, Karen Brinson-Bell, the Executive Director for the State Board of Elections, will be at UNCA. She'll be talking about, the elections for 2023 and 2024. That's at 7 p.m. at UNCA on September 19th for anyone who's interested.
And that's it for office updates.
Before you
Thank you. Mr. Aceto.
move on, if I may, Ms. Duncan, I don't expect you to know this right off the top of your head, but just things that occasionally I wake up and think about. Could we put our hands on the authorizing resolutions from these municipalities that are getting ready to vote regarding their absentee ballots? Because that they have to pass a resolution within 60 days, and that's really not our problem. I guess would like to know that we could lay our hands on it. And from the statute, it's in the nature of a continuing resolution. So once you pass it, You don't have to go do it every year. But I'm just wondering if we could just, if we can put our hands on it, we know where it is, and if not, then a little bird probably needs to tell those folks to go pass it. Yeah.
Mr. Aceto, if you could clarify for me what the resolution speaks to.
So this comes out of, what is it? It's 163. 302.
Yeah.
And that's the absentee ballot statute, and it has to do with municipalities. So, in a nutshell, they have to, by resolution, ask to for us to gather absentee ballots for them. And so, like I say, you only have to do it once. Have to do it within 60 days of an election, and then after that, it's good. But I'm just kind of making it a project to go through a little, there's so many mother may I's
Sure.
in this statute, and that and if you miss a mother may I, and then some very creative person finds a way to invalidate something that you thought you did. So that's like,
appreciate and respect your desire to make sure that our files are complete.
yeah, and we're getting ready. And the reason I got onto that was because we're getting ready to look at the delegation resolution for Corrine, for our director. And I won't jump the gun on that. I know you're coming to that later. So, but if you want to look at this, it's 163-302A. And again, all we have to do is collect that resolution. I mean, it doesn't even say that we have to. It says they have to pass it. That's what it says. So.
So it does say a copy of all resolutions adopted shall be filed with State Board of Elections and County Board of Elections.
Under 302A.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's worth.
I'm guessing that that resolution, when it was passed by the municipality, was delivered to the state, delivered here, and it was probably quite a while ago. So it's just a matter of.
Well, I'm hoping that
finding
if they
it,
approve the ballot, that they being the state board, that their little checklist told them to do that. But I've had a couple of near-death experiences where in my career where the municipality didn't do that. Municipalities have a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
We only have one thing to keep track of, and that's elections. They have a lot to keep track of besides elections. So it's easy to miss something like that.
All right.
Yeah, I think we do have those resolutions, but they, we can look and see when they were done, and we can ask for renewals too.
Well, actually, if at the next meeting you could just report on what you found, and please let us know the date of each of the resolutions that you do find.
And Mary Ann says that she points out, thank you, that they also have to get filed in the right place. And Mother May I said, did you file them in two different places? So.
All right, colleagues, any more questions for staff? All right, moving right along, the next agenda item is voting location changes. And these changes are applicable for the 2023 municipal elections. Director Duncan? Ms. Ray?
I gave you each a handout. It's underneath the agenda. And this attempt to, the request to temporarily transfer voters. Is this not working? It's on? It is on. Is it working? Sort of. We're looking at statute 163-128. That's the statute that allows the county board to approve the transfer of voters to an adjacent precinct. And we would like to propose to the board that we move 2 precincts this time. You'll see there's two pieces of paper. One is for precinct 28.1 and the second is for precinct 41.1. And if you follow down on the table that the State Board asks us to complete, you'll see the reason for this. 2019 voter turnout and 2021 voter turnout. You'll see there those precincts have had elections where nobody came at all, and the best day, one person came. So in the interests of taxpayer dollars, we are proposing that we move those to adjacent precincts. And you've also got a map. The third handout shows you the two precincts and their common border, so they are adjacent precincts. And then the fourth handout is just a Google map to show you the distance that voters, if any voters wanted to cast a vote on election day, how far they'd have to travel. The distance for 41.1 to 69.1 is longer, but that precinct, if you look back on the other map, you'll see precinct 41.1 is a very long, very tall precinct on the map. So from one end to the other is a significant distance.
Ms. Stein.
I'm just wondering why it was why the transfer from 41.1 to 69.1 point occurred versus maybe another adjacent precinct that might have been closer for folks to vote.
69.1 doesn't have a lot of eligible voters itself, and precinct 71.1, which is adjacent to it, has a lot of voters. So the thought was to give some activity to a precinct that's not quite as busy. And I don't believe there is another, no, it's not adjacent to any of the other ones. So
52.1 isn't.
Isn't
right?
Participating, no.
Okay.
Nor is 40.2.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it had only two choices, and we picked the slower precinct. So.
Just a quick question. I want to confirm a belief that I have. That in each of these instances, St. Eugene's Church would end up having two DS200s.
That's correct.
One for Precinct 5 and one for Precinct 28. And so using a precinct that gets relatively less activity as the host precinct for one of these transfers makes sense from a logistical standpoint. Less confusion, less chance that a ballot will be erroneously put into the other DS200. So that's, I believe
That's
that is a
correct.
consideration.
And there would be a demarcation
Yes.
as well. So
Yeah, that
essentially
was my
two
question.
precincts
How are
will.
they going to arrange those precincts to make that obvious?
So the person would come in at the check-in counter, and when they come to the check-in counter, that poll worker will be able to see which of the two precincts they're supposed to go to. If it's not 5.1, they'll send them over to a separate laptop with a separate DS200. And we'll have a staff person at that precinct, not specifically designated, but we'll have extra staff so that somebody can always man that precinct, if you will.
Mr. Rosito.
Last municipal election, I visited 28.1, and they asked me to ask you to do this.
Yes.
So there will be somebody who is grateful.
I think it's very disheartening for them.
Yeah.
Come to work at 6 in the morning and stay there till 7:30, and not a single person showed
Yeah,
up.
that was what happened, and they wanted to know. I don't recall they specifically suggested St. Eugene's, but they asked if we would consider consolidating precincts, and thank you, you did it. I'm also noting, I've never seen this form before, but the very last box to check says absentee voting is allowed by municipality. So I'm not the only person who lies around and thinks such useless thoughts.
Same question on
Mr. Aceto, I want you to know we do appreciate your attention to detail. It is invaluable.
And
Don't
also
belittle yourself on
it's
this.
irrational. There's no real,
It's very, very
it's
helpful.
random, utterly random.
Ms. Brain,
Just the same question, why to 5.1 instead of 4.1?
4.1 is not participating, it's not open in the municipal set. We're down from 11 down to 9.
It is Covenant Reformed Presbyterian Church, is that the one over near UNCA?
Yes,
correct.
it is. Yes.
any more questions? I did have one question that is not specifically related to the rationale on the change. My concern is when I see one person voting from a precinct, I get concerned about the voters' privacy when we report out data after the election. Because I know that our voter files will let us know who voted in a particular precinct, and if only one person voted, I think that individual's privacy might be compromised. Do we lump in single votes with larger groups?
We have done that, yes. So we all along the process, we make sure to be watching for, especially in small elections like this, for examples like that. So if it's in a board meeting, we try to make sure that we're being extra careful not to say names and that sort of thing. And then, yes, if there are precincts that have only one, then they can be consolidated and reported out differently.
Okay, good, thank you.
Do we have a number on the registered voters? Number of registered voters at 41.1?
Yes, so that is, if you look on that particular one, the total number of voters who are eligible to vote is 34. Those are the people that live inside that town.
All right, Ms. Ray, thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to move that we approve the staff recommendation that we transfer the voters from 28.1 to 5.1 for the municipal election, and that we also transfer the voters from 41.1 to 69.1 for the municipal election. Any questions about the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Thank you. The motion carries 5-0. Ms. Ray, thank you very much. We do appreciate that. Next up is public input session for the 2024 primary early voting plan. And all right, Ms. Fox, you're wired for sound.
Okay, can you hear me? Are we good? Okay, perfect. Okay, and I like to stand, so. Okay, so public input, I do have a PowerPoint board if you want to swing around, some of you. Public is in great viewing for it. So we opened public input for our proposed early voting implementation plan on Tuesday, August 1st, and we just closed it on Friday, September the 8th. So for 5 weeks, we've been accepting folks to, give us their thoughts, their feedback, and let us know what they thought on the implementation plan. So this is what I'm presenting tonight, is some of the overall patterns, what things we saw, what things people liked, what things they didn't. Before we get to that, I do want to quickly recap what we did propose in our plan, our implementation plan. So in our next slide, slide. Doesn't want to cooperate. Sorry about that, but okay. Yeah.
Magic Control F. Just type in the number. Stick with me. I'll teach you some stuff.
I will say we had great input and lots of participation. So you'll see some of those numbers. It has grown quite a bit from we tried this in 2022 for the first time, and I think it was lots of input. And we're going to do it again for the general. We'll get public input again. So we're planning to keep this up. I think it's a great way for the public to give us their thoughts, tell us what we're doing good, what we need to improve on, and go from there. But it's definitely grown in popularity. Okay. So the proposed planned implementation plan that we proposed back in August, just to kind of recap for everyone, is 11 early voting sites across the county, opening Saturday, February the 17th and February the 24th. Okay, those are optionals, and we're proposing we open those. We will be open that last Saturday. That's required for us to open anyway, so that's 3 Saturdays total. Proposing opening Sunday, February 25th. So that'll be one whole weekend there where we're open Saturday and Sunday. And weekend hours of 10 to 3, which will allow us to have one shift during the weekend. During the week, because of the longer hours, we're mandated to open from 8 to 7:30. We do have shifts. We have I couldn't expect to have people to work 11 and a half hours for 17 days. So we do have shifts, and we're able to do that during early voting, which is a great help for us to staff it. Again, on the next slide, just a reminder of the proposed sites that we listed. We talked about all of these different sites again throughout the county. We did have 2 that we said to be determined, and then but the rest have all been used in the past. I think a lot of people are familiar with these, and so we've set a pattern, which I think it's good to have a pattern and people can have that consistency. So again, that's why. So let's look at what people had to say. What public engagement we got. One more thing. Remind you of that the board has the say in the number of sites and the number and the weekend hours. That's it. They do not get a say on our weekday hours. Those are mandated. And we hope and pray for a unanimous decision, because this board, if there is a non-unanimous decision, it would then have to be presented to the state board for them to make the final determination on our plan. So I would much rather leave it in the hands of our local board right here. Okay, so on our next slide, so let's look at public engagement. We had over 2,000 views. So that's wonderful. That's almost, I can't even remember how much from the last time, but we had 1,900 responses and over 800 comments. So that has been an absolute great engagement from the public. Again, we had it open for 5 weeks and gave plenty of time for folks to chime in, and they did. All right. So what I did with all of these responses and comments, and specifically the comments, because that's where they gave their input. One of the first questions we asked is how do you rate our plan? How do you rate our proposed plan? And surprisingly, we had 70. Well, not surprisingly, I was confident. 70% approved our plan as is. They were like, you know what? It works. I can make this work. It works for me. We did have 23% that said, I approve this plan with just some minor changes. And then we had, if you combine the yellow and the red, about 7% said, you know what? There's some significant changes need to happen. And then we did have 4% that said, nope, I don't approve it at all. But we do have some folks that feel very strongly about not having early voting at all. And so that's some of those comments were. So, yes, but 93, if you add it up, that's 93 overall approval, was just that 7% that, gave some additional input, or they just don't want early voting at all. But anyways, so let's look at some of the things that people liked about the plan. So these were the top 3 reasons that I found the pattern as people saying, you know what, this is what I like about the plan. They like the weekday evening hours, so we're open till 7:30 Monday to Friday. They like Saturday and Sunday voting. We have 3 Saturdays, 1 Sunday. And they liked the fact that our sites are spread out throughout the county. So, we've got it in the north, we've got it in the south, east, and west, and, in some of those municipalities, Weaverville, Black Mountain, things like that. Out in Leicester, Fairview. So we were spread out, and of course, several sites within town as well. So that's one of the top 3 reasons people liked our plan. In the next slide, what are some of the things people didn't like? And we did have people, give their opinion. So the 3 top reasons were, they wanted extended hours. They wanted us to open earlier during the weekdays. So they wanted something before 8 o'clock. The next reason was weekend hours. They wanted us to expand our weekend hours. Okay? And they wanted that additional Sunday. So there's technically 2 Sundays in between, and we're proposing 1. Lots of folks said we need that additional Sunday. So these were the top 3 reasons that we saw keep coming up from different comments of things that they would like to, that they didn't feel they liked about the plan.
Ms. Fox, I'm very
Yes.
concerned that somebody doesn't like Barnardsville.
Well, what they found negative with the plan was that we didn't have voting in Barnersville.
Oh,
One person said
okay, it's not Barnardsville. Okay.
No.
Well, I feel better.
Obviously, we're out there on election day.
Yes.
Obviously, we have, there were some people, we're going to have early absentee by mail, of course. People need to remember early voting is just one of 3 ways to vote. Absentee by mail, always, and then, of course, on election day. So 3 ways to vote. The early voting is just one of those. So these were the top 3 things that folks didn't quite like about our plan. The next question we asked was about possible sites. Give us some possible sites. We have 2 sites that we asked for some suggestions. North Asheville, as you all know, it's always been my keeps me up at night. And then we wanted a second South Asheville location because we want to take some of the foot traffic off of the South Buncombe Library. So lots of people said the North Asheville Library, which we have used in the past, but as all of you know, parking is horrendous there. And so, but a lot of people did ask for that. UNC Asheville, great place, and we typically use it every general presidential election. And we are already in talks with UNCA to host us for the general, and that should be not a problem for us to be there. UNCA right now has a lot of construction going on campus, so it's a little messy right now for us to be there. But come the general in the fall of 2024, they're confident that a lot of that will be over with, and we will have a little better flow and with the traffic when it comes to their campus. And then Steinmart. Since 2016, I have been trying to get Steinmart. I'm still working on it, no joke. We've contacted the realtor that, and we're hoping that he will. I've recruited a few other people to see if they can get to that particular realtor who manages that property to see if they'll make it available to us, but nothing yet. So that's still to be determined. Okay, sorry to get your hopes up. but as you can see, lots of different places. Some people said Reynolds Village. Some people, Sweet Creek Road, the Shiloh Community Center. Just different areas that we've tried. Again, this is a 2.5 week commitment, so it's hard to for some of those places to give up spaces for that long, or it's not worth renting it for that short of amount of time. So it's just. But I'm not giving up. We'll still try to aim for something in the North Asheville area that has adequate parking for us. So we'll still keep at it. All right, so in the next slide, I'd like to discuss the 3 top reasons people did not like our implementation plan. And some of the reasoning behind why we are doing what we are doing. So one of the things that people had asked for, extend weekday hours, make it earlier than 8 o'clock. And those hours are mandated. We have no flexibility in that. All 100 counties in North Carolina are open Monday to Friday, 8 to 7:30, Monday to Friday. So that's what it is. Extend weekend hours. That's obviously an option that the board can consider, and it's up to you all to make that decision. I just want to bring to the fact that if right now our workers are going to be working 16 days out of the 17 poll workers, and by giving the shorter amount of hours during those days that we are working weekends, 10 to 3, which we targeted as the most when we get the most traffic, it guarantees that poll workers will have at least one day off. They can take turns and not have to work the 2 shifts that we would normally have to because of the longer hours. So again, that's why we propose those specific hours, give poll workers that option of taking a day off, either working a Saturday or working a Sunday, not having to do both if we do one shift. And then the more Sunday voting, if you look at the stat here, this is from Sunday the 23rd this is in February of 2020. Now this was before the pandemic. This is before everything shut down and we had COVID. So this was before then. We found that even when we were open later, the numbers the volume, the turnout just wasn't there. It just dramatically goes down after 1, 2 o'clock. It just drops. And so that's why we recommended, just the one Sunday. Now, are we going to propose this for the general? Absolutely not. We expect everybody and anybody to come out to vote, so we will expend on our Sunday voting. But for a primary, we just haven't seen the turnout to justify the additional day.
And if I might add, especially on the first weekend of the primary, people are still gathering information. People are still trying to figure out who exactly they want to support.
They want to vote for.
And so when you gave us the proposal earlier and you only had that second Sunday, intuitively it just made sense.
Right. So we're going to be open that second weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Yep.
Director Duncan.
And administratively for us on that to have that first weekend off, well, for poll workers have it off. We don't have it
We'll
off.
be here Sunday. Yeah.
And that gives us time. The poll workers have just started understanding their duties. It gives us time to get things caught up, give any feedback on to the workers, so that the next 2 weeks run smoothly.
Exactly.
So it's a very valuable day for us to get things in order.
Yep.
Thank you.
We can pivot. We can make any adjustments if we need to, and then get ready for the next 2 weeks where there is no days off.
Right, no days off.
No days off, yep. Which we won't have any appointments. So those were, again, I just wanted to make those, explain the reasons why we did what we did. So with all of this input that we've gathered, I am making the proposed site change for the second South Asheville location, and that is to incorporate back in the Friendship Center. The Friendship Center was used for the first time last year. I'm not gonna lie, it was not used to the full extent as it could. So I am proposing, this will be the second time we use it, so people are gonna get more familiar with it. It's gonna become something that people can count on. But also I am proposing that we add additional signage, not only on Hendersonville Road, but on Sweeten Creek Road, because you can get to the Shiloh community, to that particular center, from Sweeten Creek Road. It does require some lefts and some rights, but you do get there. And then once again, you can either go back out to Hendersonville Road or you can go out to Sweeten Creek Road, kind of right in between both of those very high traffic areas. So we're proposing as big as Asheville City will allow us legally to put out to guide those voters into this community and get them there. That site has great parking, lots of
Yes.
parking. The room is nice and big and large and open. They can accommodate all of our equipment, our workers, and it's just a beautiful, great site. Hopefully we will promote it and get people to really use it. It's very convenient.
It is so nice that there are some members of the Shiloh community who would prefer Friendship Center over Shiloh
Shiloh,
Community
you're
Center for
absolutely
Election Day.
correct. Yes.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Question, just please identify yourself and ask.
Okay, I'm Judy Williamson, and I'm a member of the Shiloh Community Association, which met last night, and the meetings, the survey came in between, so it was mostly word of mouth. So last night, the Shiloh Community Association took up this issue and authorized me to make this statement to you, because we didn't know when you were going to make this decision. Authorized me, and it's signed by Sophie Dixon, the president, that at the regular monthly meeting on September 11th, 2023, by consensus, the Shiloh Community Association agreed to strongly recommend that the Board of Elections use the Friendship Center on Shiloh Road as a voting site for early voting and for the general election. So they wanted that to be in the record, that, and they were concerned about the lack of turnout in the first round of use, but it was very new. And
Brand
let me
new.
say that there were people that were concerned by the lack of good signage, and people are not familiar. They're familiar with the community center, so it's very, very busy.
Yes.
But when they learned how wonderful the site was and how easy it was to get in and out and park, even the center director last night at the meeting was encouraging that you consider this for the general election as well. So that is my statement from.
Ms. Williamson, thank you very much for being here and for sharing the Shiloh community's consensus with us. It's very helpful. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. I've been down there, not recently, but in the past year, and driven by the community center. But the Friendship Center and the Shiloh Community Center are one and the same place, right? They're different places.
Two different. Yep.
They are, they're different places totally.
They're across from. They're not right across from each other, but they're on opposite sides of the street, very
Okay.
near to each other.
And there is a bus stop right across from the entrance.
The larger building is the Friendship Center.
No, the larger building is the
Shiloh.
Community Center.
The less busy building
Oh, the left.
is the Friendship Center. And that is why the community had, that expressed to me, members of the community expressed interest in using Friendship Center, just because the Shiloh Community Center, there's so much going on that it gets a little frantic.
You mean in terms of just kids playing basketball and all the
They
activities
do
that
after-school
go on?
programs. They do the gym. They have practices. They do basketball. They have, I think they cook and feed senior citizens. I think once or twice a week there. You name it, all kinds of clubs and clubs. Yeah.
So
that
the
do
Friendship
that.
Center is just a smaller, less
Correct.
busy
It's a-
place.
Right. Friendship Center is a private center, where Shiloh Community Center is a public City of Asheville property. Yep. But lots of parking and very nice, wide open. I wish all of our sites were like that.
Right.
So, yep. Okay, so that's the only proposed change that I'm making to the sites is that would be our South Asheville, our second South Asheville location, and we're still looking for a North Asheville location. Haven't given up on that yet. The next slide, what I'd like to just, again, we're not proposing any changes to Saturday or Sunday. We're still recommending those 2 Saturdays, that 1 Sunday from 10 to 3, and we are going to open the last Saturday, March the 2nd. We're mandated to open 8 to 3, so that's 3 Saturdays and the 1 Sunday. We're still proposing those same hours. And then lastly, just a recap of what we're proposing: 11 early voting sites, weekdays 8 to 7:30. Those are our mandated hours. And then the 2 Saturdays, the 1 Sunday 10 to 3, and then the last Saturday 8 to 3 at all sites. So that's where we're back at.
Thank you, Ms. Fox.
Okay, you're welcome.
I just had one other question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Schultz.
I guess since I've been on the board, I don't know that we've ever used the UNCA site, so I don't know where they conduct the voting over there. Is it at the Reuters Center, or is it somewhere else on the campus?
We're on campus, but it has not been in a consistent location. We've used several. We've used the gym. We've used the Highsmith Student Union Center. We've used the Blue Ridge Room. We've been throughout the different center in the campus.
The first time, it was the Zeiss Science Building that we got to use, and that was before it had been opened to students. So we were the exclusive user in the 2008 early voting sessions.
What was the parking any, I mean, it's good, for the UNCA sites, was parking not a problem, given that a lot of those parking lots are reserved for various parts of the
So UNCA is very
population on the
good
campus?
about, we give them certain parameters. We got to have curbside voting. We got to have voter parking, and our workers need to be able to park somewhere too. And so what they aim to do is to try to find a location where they can block certain parking spots for just voters, where we can have curbside voting within easy walking distance from the site, and then our workers not being too far to be able to park. So they make those accommodations, and we are able to specify which parkings are available to us.
Are there any numbers on how many of the students at UNCA vote in Asheville? I assume not very many, since it's primarily a campus where people come from elsewhere.
Oh, but I understand, there's far more than students that vote at that early voting.
No, I
site.
understand. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I don't think we get breakdowns on.
If they're student versus a regular.
Right,
Yeah.
we get age breakdowns, but we don't have
I don't have that, yeah.
occupation breakdowns.
I'm just curious, how was the turnout when UNCA has been used? Was it better than
The
North Asheville?
UNCA site is consistently in the bottom third on participation. It's tough to, you've got the South Buncombe Library, you've got North Asheville, wherever it's going to be, that put up, and West Asheville Library put up really, really, really large numbers. I don't have my historic stats with me, but I can bring them in next time.
Yeah.
I've got a
that
spreadsheet that lists every
Yep.
early voting site that's ever been used in Buncombe County
Yep, and I have it
and the
right
number
here.
of votes that were cast each time.
Yeah, so, and again, we've only used them, historically speaking, we've only used them during a general election. So I have stats from 2008, back to 2008. And we have, let's see, UNC Asheville was 3438, then 2558, 3593, 4872. And the 4872 was in 2020.
I didn't mean to interrupt your presentation. I
Okay,
just,
You're fine.
you had some more to say, though? I just wanted to say some more things about the North Asheville location, since that's a to-be-determined site.
Yeah.
The only other point I wanted to make is, based on the handout you gave us last time, if I'm recalling correctly, the North Asheville location has the highest number of absentee voters of any other early voting site. Is that right?
So
In 2016 and 2020.
Of absentee or early voting?
Early voting, I'm sorry.
South Buncombe is a consistent winner.
correct.
They're very close, though.
Yeah, but North Asheville's always in the top third.
Yep, that is correct.
But in 2020, it says North Asheville had 5,436 ballots cast. It came in number one.
Well, okay, 2020 was
For
the
the
pandemic.
general, it was,
We had the pandemic going on for the general in 2020, and so looking at those numbers is
We
not
did-
the most reliable
we
way to
did
go.
not use the North Asheville Library in 2020.
Yeah, we used Reynolds Village, didn't
We
we?
used Reynolds Village, that is correct. Yep, and we
For
had
2020 early voting?
for 2020 early voting, that's
Oh, it
correct.
says here on the thing, North
For the,
Asheville Library.
that was just, this is for the general.
Oh.
Now, the primary, I need to go look back, but we used Reynolds Village for the 2020 general.
Right.
Now, for the primary, we used in 2020,
It might have been the library.
we did use the library. Yep. And we had 5,436, yep,
I mean,
for the primary.
In the primary.
I guess
That
my
was
take
before
on,
COVID and all that. That was why.
Right, but it was a primary.
It was a primary.
And our turnout in primaries is significantly lower than it is in general elections. And
right.
so when you see 5,000 in the primary at that site, typically in a general election, if it wasn't a pandemic and stuff going on, you get somewhere between 10 and 12,000.
I mean, it is as bad as a site that North Asheville is in terms of the parking. It seems like people turn out anyway.
Oh,
So, I mean, I just,
We're fortunate to live in an engaged community, and people
They made it work.
want to be heard, and they'll go wherever we have an early voting site. The difficulty has been that the parking lot is so cramped that it inconveniences voters, library patrons, as well as the patrons of the adjacent strip mall. And one of the things that we really don't want to do is inconvenience people with our early voting scheme. And so that's why we have been actively searching for alternatives to that library, because that library, as popular as it is a tiny room with a cramped parking lot that has tons of demands. And so if we could move across the street to Steinmart or Rite Aid was empty first, so I still want Rite Aid.
Well-
That would be a big plus.
no, I think those would be better places for a lot of the reasons you just identified, but do we have to make a decision tonight?
No,
No.
Oh,
no, I believe what
oh, no,
staff
it's
is proposing
that's
is
right,
that
it's
we,
further on.
that we endorse this plan, and the revision that has been made since the original presentation is the addition of Friendship Center, which crosses off the to be determined in South Asheville. But it maintains the to be determined in North Asheville as staff continues to approach real estate agents and other members of the community trying to find an alternative to the library.
So we've
Should
got-
that alternative not be found, the library is available to us.
Yes.
So we've got to make a decision by October 17th according
Correct.
to the,
Yep, our next board meeting, well, for y'all to consider, we're proposing, would be the 17th of October, yes.
well, I'm just curious, have these real estate agents ever gotten back in touch with us? Because I know we've tried to contact them before. I mean, did they just not call back?
I've always been told, oh, there's a big box gonna move in. It does respond, but it's with some, oh, we're leasing it to a big box retailer, and then that never happens, so.
It's been empty for a year, 2 years
Oh
and a
my
half,
gosh.
or 3
Oh.
years.
For ages,
Yeah.
since 2016, 17.
17,
Rite Aid's
yeah.
been,
That's been the longest empty, yeah.
I missed that lunch counter. Bring it
Has
back.
there ever been another reason given for not letting us use it?
Right, who was it? Walgreens didn't want anybody using that Rite Aid facility because they didn't want competition.
Competition.
We only want to vote there.
They wouldn't lease it.
We don't want to sell anything. 2022, I tried to get that old SunTrust branch. And, I spoke with people and there. And it's just, nobody felt empowered to say yes. And so you get kind of stuck.
Ms. Fox, I wanted to get your take on whether you think, assuming we don't get the Rite Aid or the Steinmart building, what's your take on the difference between the Reynolds Village location that was used a couple years ago and the North Asheville location, North Asheville Library?
Reynolds Village, it has its pros and its cons as well. It's up on the hill, and some people, there was some confusion as to where in Reynolds Village we were, and signage was an issue. They do limit campaigning and signs in that location too, so that's something that we'd have to consider. They do not want campaigning, and they do not want any type of signage. So that would be a limitation for us. If the space is open and big enough, we can make it work. Parking can be a little bit challenging depending on which way you come in. Again,
The library is free.
Library, yeah, we would be paying for that space. Library is free, yeah. But
Reynolds Village was kind of a last resort.
yeah,
It's just
we
one of
made
those
it work,
things.
but it wasn't ideal.
Mr. Quinn,
Ms. Brain?
if Friendship Center is private, is that one we're renting?
Yes. Yes, we would be leasing that from the owner. Yeah.
Did you have any more, Ms. Fox?
That is all I have for you today.
Colleagues,
More
any
to
questions,
marinate.
comments?
I just had another question. Was there any objection to using the Wesley Grant Center as I understand it, in lieu of
I have no.
the office here? Okay.
That's another site that I think we have consistently used year after year, and people have gotten used to it, and it's nice to have that consistency. So, and they've expanded, and it's a great facility now.
Right.
Really nice. So, we're looking forward to being able to use it again.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. When we use a site consistently for a period of time, its base grows. Folks have learned where it is and whether or not it's convenient for them, and we see higher use.
The consistency of it, yeah.
The statistics that Ms. Fox just noted for UNCA, I was struck by the size of the turnout. At the most recent election, 4,872 was far and away the highest it's ever been at UNCA. That's just the benefit of consistency. The more consistent we can be, whether it's our precinct boundaries, our legislative boundaries, it makes it much easier for members of the community to engage our process. Same places, same boundaries. It really does work.
We're creatures of habit.
Indeed.
All right, thank you.
I did want to make one comment. It's slightly off topic, but we do an in lieu of site because we don't have the capacity to vote at headquarters or at 50. We
What do
have
you-
to have that for operations. So then we're authorized to have an in lieu of site within a mile of
Right.
headquarters.
And if I may, when 50 Cox was built out for election services, retail space was constructed right there on Cox Avenue. But what has happened is election operations, the necessity for a robust election operations center has taken over the space that we were going to use for retail, for early voting and that sort of thing at 50 Cox. It's just reality overtook our aspirations on that. And so that's why we are back at the Wesley Grant Southside Center. So we have the staff proposal. Do you need a vote from us today, or do you just want to wait till October? Well, how about a straw poll? Nothing binding. I appreciate the the staff work that's gone into this. I especially appreciate the public's participation, the fact that staff in election services and other corners of county government have given us this facility that enables the broader community to participate in this discussion. I think that's highly valuable. Appreciate it a great
Mr. Chair,
deal.
along those lines, just one other thought about, all those people that did give input. If we don't respond to that input, do they, do they just think, well, hell, what's the point? Is there a way to give, on the side, is there a way to describe why we made our choices in some way that would be reasonable? Because I just hate for people to think, well, why should I even bother if they're not going to do anything with the information?
Do you mean on that public input page?
Right, or
Like,
someplace
kind
where
of
they can get
translate
back.
what
Yes,
we talked about
right,
today, the
right.
outcome of that. Absolutely. We can
Yeah.
absolutely do that.
Because some things, we couldn't change those weekday hours. The folks who didn't want early voting at all, sorry, the law says 2.5 weeks of early voting.
In our decision
And those
about-
are easy, but the other ones about, well, how come we're
Poll
not open
workers,
that first
right.
Sunday? I think it would be very valuable for members of the community to understand the rationale. Thank you, Sally. That's a very good idea. Mr. Schultz.
I just had one other question for Ms. Fox, and it's not having anything that I disagree with respect to the recommendation, but it sounds like that having that one shift on the weekends, correct? You really need that to give the poll workers some time off, as I understand it.
Correct.
That's primarily the reason.
Right. We're working. This is not about the staff here at the Board of Elections.
Sure, yeah.
This is about the poll workers. They're working Monday through Friday, 2 shifts. So we have a morning and an afternoon shift. And if we extend those hours on the weekends, that means even the weekends would mean 2 shifts. And so this will guarantee that morning and afternoon teams can take turns either working that Saturday or the Sunday, not having to do both.
So it basically gives them some time off.
Correct.
So the only real way to solve that would be to have more poll workers, correct?
It would have, right.
Okay.
Be meeting to have either a separate team or something like that. Yeah.
But obviously, that means you're going to have to go out and recruit more people. and
Recruit more
pay
and
more.
more budget, more money.
Yeah, yeah.
We budgeted for a certain number of sites with a certain number of workers. We did budget for 2 shifts, but, it would mean more money that was not budgeted for if we increased the number of workers.
And you gave us a graph of the breakdown. There is some drop-off after 3 o'clock.
After 3 o'clock, that's correct.
There's still a fair number of people who vote, but, I'm thinking if somebody is told you have to vote between 10 and 3 as opposed to voting between 10 and 5, odds are if they're early voting, they're going to make an effort to get there between 10 and 3.
Right.
On
and
the
they can-
assumption that early voters are really interested in voting and getting it out of the way and not show up on election day. It's all kind of built on that assumption, I guess.
Right, and if you can't make it from 10 to 3, there's always absentee by mail. There's 10 to 3 on the first Saturday, the second Saturday, the second Sunday, and then 8 to 3 the final Saturday. There are options.
There are options. I wish we could please everybody, but the fact of the matter is, we're working with what we've got, our resources, and the means that we have to make it happen. So we've given the best robust plan that we think we can give the public here in Buncombe County.
Director Duncan.
So I just want to reiterate that 93% of people were happy with the plan. And it's true, we have different voting methods, so we can't, remember, we're not trying to satisfy everyone with this early voting plan. There's people who want to vote other methods. We also have an extremely large, and I'm very proud of it, I like it. We have a very robust early voting program in Buncombe County. And we need to, as always, in everything that we do, make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. And so, kind of overall big picture, I think that this plan that Nagy is proposing does all of that.
All right, thank you. I would like to take an informal poll of the board. And I'm just going to go around, and I'm going to start with me. I support the early voting plan as presented up to this point. I am concerned about the North Asheville site, but I know how hard staff is working trying to find something that works. In every other respect, I think that the plan is sound operationally and fiscally. But that's just my view. Ms. Brain?
I think the plan is more than sufficient. I mean, I think it's, as you say, robust. I agree with Sally that it would be nice to have a response to the public input, just so people know you actually read them, that you didn't just put it up and that was that. At least reasons make a difference, and I think most people will understand those, as well as you can reiterate, we do have these other methods of voting. So, other than that, I don't see any problem with the plan.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
I think they've done an excellent job here. I think all the locations for early voting are centrally located. I was concerned about the South Asheville location, but I don't think there is a place more centrally located than the Friendship Center. I'm ready to go with it and see what happens with North Asheville.
Thank you. Mr. Acita?
I approve the plan and would particularly want to commend Nagy for the quality of the presentation.
Even better than dazzling.
Oh, it wasn't, it's better, yes, far better than dazzling. Dazzling would be to down it with faint praise. It's far better than that.
Ms. Stein?
I'm great with the plan, and thanks to all of the staff for working so hard to get it ready and present it to us so well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fox, we do look forward to the next presentation next month. But in the meantime, you have the board's thanks and appreciation. Director Duncan?
Okay, so the final, well, not the final. Gotta do next meeting date. But it has been brought up a few times that the board might want to renew the director delegations, and there's some good reasons to do that. We traditionally in Buncombe County have done that when a director is hired, and that has happened twice in 30 years. So, and we have done that by submitting the job description to the State Board of Elections. And that was done when I was hired in 2020. But things have changed since then. We do job descriptions different in the county now, and we have also restructured adding a deputy director. And so some other counties do their delegations via resolution, so I think that's an option that would be appealing to the board. I gathered some of those resolutions from other counties, and I have shared that with Kurt Euler. So he is drafting a resolution, and then I'll take a look at that, email it all out to you to look over, and then we can take a look at it, make changes that you would like, and kind of renew that resolution. I would like to know if there are any specific things that you would like me to address or discuss with Kurt while I'm in the process of drafting.
I'm guessing that my colleagues are interested in the elements in the delegations as opposed to the format or the legalese. So if we could get to every member of the board a copy of the current delegation, then that would be a good starting place.
Mr. Quinn, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness. And I said I was going to be right familiar with this microphone. I apologize. What I've asked Director Duncan to do is make copies of the current delegations available to all the members of the board before the next meeting, so that when we do meet to discuss the delegations, we do so from a strong knowledge base.
I just had one question about the, I've
Mr. Schultz.
never seen the delegation, but 163-33 sets forth all the powers and duties of the county boards, and then 163-35 talks about the delegation. In these assignments, is that the correct term? Assignment of duties to the director? I mean, does it, I'm not,
The law gives to the Board of Elections certain legal authority. And what we do in some instances is we delegate authority that has been granted to the board to the director, so that the director can manage the operation on a day-to-day basis without having to turn to the board all the time.
no, and I'm all for the delegation. I'm just curious, I haven't seen the document, does the document go through the specific paragraphs of 163-33 or describe them more generally?
The ones that I have seen described more generally, I like the idea of going through, tying it more closely to 33.
I think that's a good idea. So it's more clear. As far as I can tell, the only restriction on assigning duties to you is that the statute says we can't delegate any of the quasi-judicial or policy-making duties of the board. So basically, the hearings on the various things we have from time to time, and then policy decisions like, I guess, the budget.
Or the early voting plan.
Yeah, the early voting plan.
That's correct, yes. And you can delegate authority for me to carry out actions, but not the responsibility.
I didn't catch that. Carry out the
The authority for my office to carry out the tasks, but the responsibility still remains with the board. And you're correct, there are some that are not delegatable.
And so the next step on this is Mr. Euler is going to draft a resolution for the board's consideration. I'm not really sure what that resolution would look like. I don't know what level of detail it will have, but our discussion of that resolution will be aided by knowing what the current delegations look like. And then we can figure out exactly how we believe it should look and act accordingly. Mr. Aceto?
Quinn, yeah, first of all, thank you so much for taking this up. And I have just some general thoughts. One is I got a lot out of attending the state board meeting in conjunction with the state convention. And one of the things I noted was how they refer to these as delegations, and it's something that's this generic. And I think this question of how granular do you get in this? The only thing that really has to be in there that I can see is that it's got to. It says the resolution shall require adherence to 163.33, and that's the laundry list of things that you and I are responsible for. So I mean, but that's just those are magic words. That's just those magic words going there, and just like that. Also, I thought it was interesting that I don't know that we need to be so granular, other than kind of selective. That The problem with getting too specific is that if you leave something out, it becomes more, that becomes more fraught. So there has to be some kind of a happy medium in there of being specific, referring to 163.33, but I don't know that everything has to be in there. But I thought it was interesting that the state board, whenever they did an investigation into an irregularity, that's what they call a delegation. So the state board would vote. It's kind of a boilerplate resolution, but if there was any kind of an irregularity that involving a local board, then they would specifically task the director, Karen Brinson Bell, and staff with looking into that. So, really, the audience for these things really is litigation. So if somebody comes back and says, where was your authority? I mean, you were the board, you didn't, you're Ms. Duncan carried it out, but where did you give her that authority? You didn't delegate to her. So that's really what we're looking for, is a sort of a smart aleck litigator, pardon my French, who's going to go back into this. And like what happened to the county when they didn't pass that one extra resolution to authorize the zoning ordinance. 2 years later, they found they didn't have a zoning ordinance. So that's the kind of thing that keeps me awake at night, is coming back to something later and finding out that someone has taken advantage of the fact that we were busy. So that's why I brought that up about the municipalities. So, I don't know that we need to get granular in the sense that's you meet yourself coming the other way, doing that. But we would think about what kind of tasks is the director and staff taking on that the public would come back and say, where did you tell them to do this? Okay, where did you pass that along? In the context of litigation, or in the context of a political discussion, or whatever, in the context of a budget discussion, something like that, where a specific task becomes, gets the spotlight put on it. So, but certainly, so going forward, even if we pass this, we have to continue to ask ourselves as a board, what sort of things, when do we need to step in and say, oh, by the way, we have this general resolution, but specifically, we want our director to look into X. And that, I think, would be the case in certainly if there's any kind of an investigation into an irregularity, a voter challenge or complaint, and that where we are directing that investigation take place, just as part of our. That's just belt and suspenders. The other thing is that we have a deputy director, and something ought to be said about that. That's a delegation of a delegation, and if we could incorporate her job description into this in some way, that's an example of some place where we ought to be specific, simply because that we passed that to you and you passed it along. So we are authorizing you to delegate what we've delegated, and I think that's important. And finally, there is a section in the statute regarding the chairman's authority, not by resolution, but simply to delegate certain of the chairman's own authority to the executive director. And it's not said specifically how that's done, or that it has to be in writing. But I simply want to put a little highlighter around it, that Jake is specifically, directed. It's directed that he can do this, but there's this implication that it is a sort of a case by case thing, not that he would have to continually do that. But I'm not sure exactly how to go about that. It doesn't say anything about a resolution. It doesn't seem that would be appropriate. But for Jake's own sake, for the director, for our chairman's sake, that there should be some acknowledgement that, as to signatures or certain things that the director, that the chairman, that are reserved to the chairman, that the statute says the chairman can pass along to the director. that there's some record of that somewhere, whether it's at a meeting and Jake simply acknowledges it, or and I can't think of anything specific that has happened where that would have presented a problem. So I know we've had some discussion, where Jake took on a personnel matter or something, and we said, "No, Jake, don't do that." So,
Lesson learned.
And Jake was gracious about that. So this is kind of the opposite of that, is where now Jake is carving out something and saying, "This is something that is my responsibility, but by statute, I'm handing
Right.
it along to the director."
I can give you an example. At our last meeting, we did 235 appointments of election officials. And I believe Ms. Brain asked, so what about the other 5? Who appoints them? And the chair has that authority, and I ask staff to handle it. I don't get into the details and say, let's put Mary there and put Joe over here. I delegate that to staff. Now,
I guess
you raised a question, a very good question. Is that formalized? Is that documented? How does the world know that you have done that?
But it came up.
And thank you for bringing it up, because now the world knows, because I've just told them. But in fact, it has not been documented. It has not been formalized. It has been the way we've conducted business.
But it was acknowledged in a public meeting, in a public place. And that's probably sufficient. And note also that you're not delegating anything to the staff generically. This is by law. This is between you and our director. It's between Jake and Kareem. This is something that they do. And it's really between you. It's just, the other 4 of us aren't that's not our part of our authority. That's your authority. But you would want to be acknowledged.
Right.
And you, for the sake of future chairs, that you're doing that.
And for the sake of the board, everybody should, I believe all members of the board should have a very clear idea.
And the public.
Of what's going on.
The public knows.
and
The public,
why
the
it's
public
happening
knows
the way
that
it
you
is.
did that, and you said.
No, thank you. That's, again, at the top of the meeting, I commended your attention to detail, and this is just another instance where I think your suggestions can go a long way towards keeping us on the straight and narrow. I appreciate that.
Is this just so that certain things won't happen?
Correct. No surprises.
Yeah. I do want to make one point. I think Steve has a good point about not getting too granular about the duties of the assignment. But at the same time, one thing you may want to bring up with Kurt, and I don't pretend to know this area of the law, but, there's always a possibility that the board can get sued. I mean, Karen Branson Bell has been sued multiple times in the North Carolina courts. But I guess the one thing he would know about is whether there's a possibility for respondeat superior liability, meaning that liability for any actions you do automatically would apply to the board as well, or whether some different standard of proof is necessary. So that may be something to ask him in terms of drafting the delegation, to what extent you want to be detailed about drafting the delegation. I keep getting the correct terminology mixed up, but the assignment or delegation of duties.
So let me recap. Broad is what we're kind of aiming at here, using GS 163.33 as the basis. And then possibly when we run into things that we want to be specific under certain scenarios, you take that separately. Do that either through minutes or policy or resolution. That
Specifically a resolution.
That makes
a
sense.
delegation, as the state would call it.
That makes sense to me. My recommendation for the deputy, sorry, Neggy, is to only delegate that authority in an emergency where you would have to have an interim director. So I get hit by a bus, then it goes to the deputy. I think that the law already covers when the director has been delegated something that it is my responsibility to have my staff carry that out. So I think that's covered already.
I would like for us just to acknowledge in a sentence or less that you have done so. Really, I mean, I don't think, again, we're not delegating anything to Ms. Fox. And I guess that needs to be made clear. We're not.
Yes, I think that is a
But
place where we would be opening
acknowledge
liability.
that you have done so.
Mhm.
But I do think that you ought to go over 163-33 with Kurt and make sure it's not too broadly worded. I mean, I'm not saying go through each and every one of these and say, well, subsection 1 is delegated, subsection 2, subsection 4, subsection 5. But I don't think it ought to be too general because you may create problems for the board.
And I'd be worried about that because then somebody thinks, well, you
Okay.
left that one out.
We
You
are
know.
going down a rabbit hole, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Can we please look at the current delegations?
Yeah.
I don't want to start with a blank sheet. I want to start with the status quo. And I want to make sure that Mr. Euler is aware of what the current delegations say. And whatever we propose, I'm going to need to see how we get from the status quo to this new model, if there's going to be something new.
I would also suggest that when we're looking at the other delegations, we're looking at delegations from other counties. Is that correct? Okay. So there are other counties that have a assistant director that we could look to see how they wrote that up as well. So.
Good.
The one that's a concern, Mr. Quinn and Ms. Duncan, is subsection 10 about appointing and removing employees. I certainly think that ought to be within your scope of duties. But, I think there has to be some detail added about that and what the potential liability of the board would be for, situations that blow up.
The board doesn't have anything to do with hiring and firing staff aside from the director, at all. At all.
But it says.
That is an operational,
I would just.
it's that the director is responsible for hiring and firing. And I want you to know we have had instances in the past year where employees were terminated and they have turned to the board, and in my experience, the worst thing that a board member can do is respond to such an approach. It is not the board's business.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure that jives with the statute, so I think it ought to be made clear in the assignment.
Yeah, and this is why I'm so interested in seeing their current delegations, and I'm actually going to stop this discussion right now until we get those current delegations, and we all have an opportunity to review them and look at those delegations through. We've got 5 sets of eyes here, and we all need to take a look at those things, see what makes sense to us, see what doesn't make sense to us, and then all come back together and develop a consensus approach on this. And with Counselor Euler's assistance, I'm confident that we can get something. But there's too much uncertainty around here right now without seeing the status quo, and so I just don't want to continue this discussion. So what I'm most interested in is next steps on this matter. When should we expect to have our next discussion on this? Our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, October 10th.
I think we can do it then.
Okay. So that meeting, and here I am segueing right into the next agenda topic. Next meeting is Tuesday, October 10th. I believe it is at 5:30 p.m. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. It is an absentee meeting. It will be our first absentee meeting for the municipal election.
3:30.
3:30. Thank you for
Starts at
that,
3:30.
Mary Ann. I appreciate it. 5:30, 3:30. I can never remember.
It is 3:30.
Good. Thank you. So next
I
meeting
believe we're doing board testing. Is that the board testing date? Trying to bring it up. Machine testing, sorry, correct.
At 3:30?
Substitute ballot review and early voting machine election day testing is what's
Okay. So
I don't know how we have any early ballots at that time, but
we'll small number.
mail in.
And will we meet here, or the machine testing will be where? Right here.
We'll meet here, and then we will
Go over there.
end
Okay.
up adjourning to 50 Cox Avenue, where we will reconvene, and then we'll end up adjourning the meeting out of 50 Cox. Okay, so at that meeting, we will do absentee ballots. We will tackle the delegations of authority. We won't do the early voting plan next time. When's that, the 17th? 17th, good, thank you. All righty. Thank you, members of the public, for sticking with us for so long. It's about 5 minutes to 7. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the board? Again, we really do appreciate you coming. Ms. Williams?
I'd like to say from my heart, thank you. This is profoundly reassuring. Who watches a lot of news. So, I'm deeply grateful to each and every one of you. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. I consider myself incredibly fortunate to work with this board and this staff. Buncombe's in pretty good shape. Any more business to come before the board today? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned at about 5 minutes to 7. Hopefully the Orioles have already scored a couple of runs. No, I'd adjourn the meeting. That's off the record.